Hello again, welcome to Chess-Based Workshop. I'm Steve Lopez, your host. Thank you for clicking on the link and joining us. It never ceases to amaze me how cool features get slid into software and nobody makes a big deal out of them, and then one day you're looking at something in a, let's say, Fritz13 or Fritz12 and say, I don't remember seeing that before. Well, that happens every now and again. This is something that's been in the software for actually a couple of versions now, but you may have missed because it was not heavily trumpeted, heavily promoted when the ads were coming out talking about the new features of the software. So I'd like to show you a feature that you may not even be aware is in Fritz, but has actually been in Fritz for a while. We're looking at Fritz13 here, and you can of course go to a database simply by clicking the database button or hitting F12 on your keyboard, and it takes you to your database. I have a database loaded here that is one on the Caro-Kann defense, the Caro-Kann advanced variation. Technically there's some other stuff in here as well. Anything that's a B12 ECO code is in this database. So I was looking at a game from this database, and I want to show you first of all, when you go to filter games, you may not have noticed this, and it would not apply to this database. This would apply to a database of games that you have played against Fritz. Your games are automatically saved, as you're probably aware. If you go to that database and you select time control in the search mask, basically you go to filter games, which brings up the search mask, click time control. You have the ability to search for blitz games, tournament games, the time controls, as well as refine a search by selecting specific times. So for example, if you played a bunch of 30-minute games, you could select blitz and it would bring up all of the games that were played at game in X time controls. However, if you want to narrow the search just the games you played, let's say at 30-minute time controls, you could go here to time and set it for 30 and 30. Now again, I'm not going to do this because this database does not qualify for this kind of a search. These are not games that I played or games that have time controls attached to them. But you can now search in Fritz for games by time control, which is something relatively recent. Very nice to do if you are somebody who plays a lot of chess on the Play Chess server or a lot of chess against Fritz or any other chess engine. You have the ability to do these time control searches. But this is something else right here. Is it used to be you could look at a list of games, you could also look at a list of openings. Now we've seen before this database has its own opening key that I imported from ChessBase, so it does not apply to this database. However, typically here you would have some buttons that allow you to create an opening key. Now we've been able to do this in Fritz for a long time. I believe that was introduced, if I remember correctly, it was introduced in Fritz 5 way back in the late 1990s. However, what we have here is we have additional keys that can be attached to a database, and you can look at these keys in Fritz if such a key is attached to a database. However, it used to be that if you clicked on one of these links, you didn't get these buttons, you just got nothing. It would just say there was no key found, there were no entries. However, what you can do now in Fritz is that if you would like to create, for example, here, an Endgame key, you can do it. Keys, of course, as we've discussed before, are simply indexes. For example, this is an index of all the variations that occur in ECO code B12, which includes the Caro-Kann advanced variation as well as some additional openings that are kind of side openings. But this is a key of Caro-Kann advanced variations, and I can go to a specific sub-variation and just basically drill down until I get to some games. Just a way to classify openings. And of course, clicking the two dots at the top brings you back up. Well, we've always had the ability to do additional keys in ChessBase. However, Fritz will now automatically generate a key for you. I'll show you how to do that right now. If you want to have Fritz auto-generate a key, just click on an unkeyed theme, Endgame, strategy, whatever it happens to be, and click either install big key or install small key. I've done it both ways for Endgames. It doesn't make a lick of difference which one you select. You'll get the same result. So there is no big key or small key for Endgames. But clicking one of them, you just click the button. I'm going to click on install small key. And we'll have to wait a moment. We have a status bar going across the screen, and just that quick, got this database of several thousand games, and the games have been classified. Here we have games with pure rook endings. Double click on it. We have some subclassifications, say rook and 4 pawn against rook and 3 pawn. Is right here. There's 326 games, and there are 2 dots which shows there's additional subkeys. Whether we have passed pawns, passed versus no passed pawns, etc. For example, here we have 2 games, rook and 4 pawns against rook and 3 pawns, in which both sides have passed pawns. We double click, we get to a couple different games. We can click on one of them, and look at here. We have rook and 4 pawns against rook and 3 pawns, and both sides have passed pawns. So it is absolutely correct. Go back to our game list. We can click on the 2 dots at the top to go to the next higher level of keys. Rook and 4 against rook and 3. Both sides have passed pawns, but the pawns are separated. And there we go. We have separated pawns for the one side. So that's a really cool way to find individual endgames by their themes. Remember to go to the next higher level, click on the 2 dots at the top as I'm doing here. Anything that does not fall into this list of classifications will come up down here as loose games, which you can also look at. And just hit F12 or click the database button to go back to your game list when you're done perusing the game. Notice also that when you double click on a game, it jumps you right to that end game position. So if we back up one, here we had 2 rooks against 1 rook. So after they swap rooks, that qualifies as an endgame position, because all of these endgames in this list are 1 rook with a certain number of pawns against another rook with a certain number of pawns. Very simple, and it's done automatically. All you have to do is click on Endgames. You'll remember the buttons that we saw there. Click either big key or small key. They both do the same thing. They will both generate this exact same key, of which the top level looks like this: Endgames, and there's a list of different kinds of endgames. And you can just search for particular endgames in your database. Without actually doing a position search, these are all pre-generated. Queen and 2 pawns against queen and 1 pawn with no passers. There we are. 2, 1, no passed pawn yet. Could happen. We'll have to play through the game, see if somebody actually achieves that. Well, nope, because queen took. And the game winds up being a draw. Not surprising. So there you go. That's how you generate keys in the Fritz software. Generate endgame keys. Till next time, for Chess Base Workshop, I'm Steve Lopez, reminding you to please do have fun.